Benjamin at Work, Episode 13. It's called Causality, or The Lucky 13 in Egypt. In the previous episode, I shared with you some information about my asset, in particular, my private library. In this episode, we're going to continue along that vein of thought, and I'm going to share with you some of the work that I have to do in the future with respect to that asset, the maintenance of my private library. Just like every book has a title, in my library, every book has a story that goes with it. And there are stories that I can remember and share with you. For example, this book, the Encyclopedia of Mathematics, the Concise Encyclopedia of Mathematics, is one of the first books that I purchased, and it has a story. I read it often in the company of my friends and colleagues, and most people know that this is one of my favorite reading topics. This book was given to me as a gift from my godmother. It is a hymnal, and I treasure this because I take it out often to learn a new song or two. As you can see, all of these books need some binding work to be done to them, and that is what I have to do in the future to maintain my assets. It turns out that the hardcover books fare much better than the softcover books. In particular, this very large book that was a gift to me from a professor at Savannah State College. His name was Dr. Jackson. This book was in the study room, and I asked him, could I keep it? And he said yes. And so I have found that I read this book all the time. I've been reading it ever since, and it's probably my favorite go-to book that I have. Engineering book called Engineer in Training Reference Manual. I love it. And this book was just laying around in the house, and I believe it belonged to my brother, uh, one of his library uh, contents, and I sort of requisitioned it because he seemed to not be using it. Uh, so it ended up amongst my library. I'm in charge of all the books, I guess. This is one of my first purchases once I had been introduced to the Made Simple books. When I was browsing through a bookstore, I would pick one up. So this one became one of the ones that I read and did all of the exercises in before I even entered college at Savannah State. Uh, it helped me a lot having done that work beforehand. I succeeded very well in the mathematics area because of it. This one also is a book that I bought. I believe this one is the calculus book. I also read it before I entered Savannah State College, and having read this book enabled me to take a standardized test and go directly into advanced calculus classes and not have to take the elementary classes. And I was none worse for having done that. It helped prepare me very well. So a lesson to be learned in that if you prepare for your next step in life, you'll probably succeed at it. This book also was one of my brother's books from his library. just seemed to have been laying around. I guess he read it. This is an electronics book. And I read this book before I began my very first design uh, of electric propulsion systems. I used the knowledge that I acquired in this book. Oh, look, there's some drawing. My brother tried a little bit of art work in his years, I guess. But that one was very helpful in helping me to design my first electric propulsion system. So books have a story and they have a use. They are still valuable to me because I can imagine a situation where if something should happen and I could not use the computer, then I would have to grab a book and use the reference information in that book. And also sometimes it's just very handy to work with a book. This is one of my favorites. It was a reference in one of my books that I wrote about electric propulsion. It needs some work, of course. They all do. But you can imagine a war starting in electric warfare. The first thing that might happen is they would take out all of our transformers and we would not be able to use our computers and we would be stuck and we would need some information to maybe uh, jury rig some old equipment and we would have to take out all of our books and use them again. So they're still valuable. I wouldn't recommend throwing them away. I don't throw mine away. I just keep fixing them, try to keep them in shape. So this is mathematics for scientists and engineers. It has some wear and tear, as you can see. One of my college electronics engineering technology course books. This one you see I have torn up because I have used it a lot. I read it a lot. And after I graduated, I went on and continued to read this until I had finished every chapter. So I like to do that. After you understand the subject, reading a book in it becomes a pleasure and not a difficult chore as it is when you're first learning the subject. So that is one of the favorite things I like to do with my books is read them after I have a very good understanding and go back and read them again. And they are fun to read and it's a pleasure. This is my last, I would say my most recent acquisition. It's not my last, but it doesn't need any work. I bought it from Goodwill. I guess it was a charity thing or something like that, but it's a pretty good quality book. And so I'm reading on that one now. I think I'm going to enjoy this one, but I'm glad I don't have to do any work. I just need to try to take better care of this book and all of my other books in the future. For the new business this week, I'm going to report that the patent application is going well. Actually starting to put in the description and the drawings are nearly finished. And all I have to do is put it together. I'm just disappointed that I have to do all of this myself. I was hoping that my business would advance to the level where I would be having people do some of this work for me. But that must still be in the future. And beginning with this episode and the next, we're going to talk about the causal factors surrounding plane space design. For now, I'll just say that all of that damage wasn't my fault, that's all. Just saying.